The moment, usually somewhere between heartbreak and hope, when we realize something that shakes us a little. People aren't thinking about us as much as we think they are. It sounds harsh at first, even a little lonely, but stay with me. Most of us walk through the world believing on some level that other people are watching, judging, measuring. And so we start performing. We filter our words, we smooth the edges, we hustle for approval. We live like we're on a stage and the world is our audience. But the truth is, everyone is tangled up in their own story. They're consumed with their own fears, insecurities, dreams, and deadlines. They're thinking about their bills, their relationships, their mental health, their grocery list. We're not sitting around dissecting your choices. They just trying to survive their own script. And the moment you stop expecting others to carry your story, your shame, your need for validation, that's the moment you actually get free. You stop asking, what will they think, and start asking, what do I need? You stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort zone and start expanding into your own truth. This isn't about being invisible, it's about being unshackled. It's not that you don't matter, you do, deeply. It's just that your worth was never supposed to be measured by how often other people think about you. Let that sink in. You're allowed to live a beautiful, bold, messy, meaningful life without needing it to be witnessed to be valid. The people who love you will still show up. But you're not here to audition for their love. You're here to honor your story, whether they clap or not. And maybe the real magic happens when you stop trying to be the main character in their story and start being the author of your own. When we're young, we crave approval from our parents, teachers, or peers. We get praised for a good grade or a kind word, and it feels like we've struck gold. But as we grow, the bar shifts. Suddenly, it's not enough to just be good or nice. Now it's about fitting in with a certain group, looking a certain way, earning a certain status. And even if you get there, the target moves again. You'll hear voices, whether from your workplace, social media, friends, or even yourself, whispering, do more, be better, look different, say the right thing. And because we want to be seen, accepted, loved, we chase that shifting goalpost, believing that if we just reach it, then we'll finally feel enough. But here's the brutal truth. No external validation can ever truly satisfy you because it's always changing. When your worth depends on someone else's recognition, you're tethered to an endless cycle of trying to prove yourself, never quite arriving, never fully whole. That's why it's so important to shift the source of validation inside. Instead of asking, do they like me or am I enough for them? Ask yourself, am I enough for me? Learning to root your worth in your own values, your own sense of meaning, your own integrity, that's where lasting peace lives. And this isn't about arrogance or ignoring feedback. It's about grounding yourself in a steady foundation. So when the world's applause fades or the target moves again, you don't lose yourself. Because when your validation comes from within, you stop being a puppet to other people's opinions. You become the author of your own worth. And that freedom, that's where real power begins. There's a saying that really captures a deep, painful truth. Resentment is the receipt you keep from people you tried to impress. Think about that for a moment. How many times have you bent yourself into a shape that didn't quite fit just to make someone else comfortable? You changed your opinions, hid your feelings, took on extra work, or stayed silent when you wanted to speak up because you thought if you did, you'd be loved more, accepted more, valued more. Maybe it was a boss, a partner, a friend, or even society at large. Maybe it was the voice inside your head telling you to be better, nicer, more like them. At first, it feels like a small price to pay for connection or approval, so you give a little more, and you ignore that growing discomfort. But over time, something shifts. You realize you're exhausted, bitter, frustrated, you feel unseen, unappreciated, maybe even used. That bitterness, that simmering, gnawing feeling is resentment. It's the emotional receipt that says, I did this for you and you didn't even notice. Resentment isn't just anger, it's the residue of unmet needs, of boundaries crossed, of self-worth compromised. Here's the hard truth. Resentment grows when we do things for others at the cost of doing them for ourselves. It's a warning light flashing, telling us we've lost sight of our own values, our own desires, our own limits. But here's the good news. You can stop collecting those receipts. You can stop trying to earn your value through someone else's eyes. You can start doing things because they matter to you, because they feed your soul, because they align with the person you want to be. When you do that, resentment doesn't have room to grow. You set boundaries, not walls. You say no when it's needed, yes when it feels right. You create from a place of authenticity, not obligation. And what happens then is powerful. You reclaim your energy, your joy, your freedom. Because living for yourself doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you care enough about yourself to show up whole. And that is the truest gift you can give, not just to yourself, but to the people around you. When we think about vulnerability, many of us picture a moment on stage, an emotional confession, a grand reveal, a dramatic unveiling of our true selves. We imagine vulnerability as a performance, something you do to gain sympathy or admiration. But real vulnerability is nothing like a show. Vulnerability is permission. It's permission to be seen exactly as you are, without masks or filters, without scripts or rehearsals. It's permission to show up with your messy, imperfect, beautiful humanity. And this is a hard thing to practice because vulnerability requires courage, the courage to risk being misunderstood, rejected, or hurt. It asks us to move beyond our fear of judgment and embrace uncertainty. But here's the paradox. Vulnerability is not about seeking validation from others. It's about giving yourself permission to be honest and real. It's the radical act of saying to yourself, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have it all figured out. I am enough as I am. And when you give yourself that permission, something incredible happens. You free yourself from the exhausting act of pretending. You stop performing to fit a mold that wasn't made for you. And in that freedom, you invite others to do the same. Vulnerability creates connection, not because it's flashy or dramatic, but because it's authentic. When you allow yourself to be seen in your full humanity, you make it safe for others to do the same. That safety is the soil where trust grows, where real relationships take root. So vulnerability isn't about putting on a show for the world. It's about giving yourself permission to live honestly and wholly. It's about being brave enough to say, this is me, even when the outcome is uncertain. And when you embrace vulnerability this way, you step into your power because you no longer need to hide behind perfection, shame, or fear. You show up fully, and that's the most revolutionary thing you can do. This is one of those truths that can be both comforting and challenging at the same time. You are the only one who will live with every version of yourself. Every choice you've made, every regret, every triumph, every wound, every healing. Think about it. No one else will walk through your memories. No one else will carry your stories. No one else will feel the weight of your disappointments or the glow of your successes the way you do. That means ultimately you are responsible for the relationship you have with yourself. So many of us live in ways that please others or meet external expectations, forgetting that at the end of the day, we still have to show up in our own skin, alone with our thoughts, feelings, and choices. You might spend hours making sure the world likes your Instagram photos or that your work impresses your boss. But who are you when the lights go out and the audience disappears? This is where self-compassion becomes revolutionary. Because when you realize that you will live with every version of you, you start asking a deeper question: which version do I want to live with? Will you live with the version who always put others' needs above your own, who sacrificed your joy to avoid conflict, who silenced your voice to fit in? Or will you live with the version who honored their own truth, who set boundaries, who chose courage over comfort? No one else has to answer these questions for you. You are the steward of your own life. This responsibility can feel heavy, but it is also empowering. You get to decide how you treat yourself, how you forgive yourself, how you grow and change. You get to decide what kind of person you want to be in the story of your own life. So when the world tells you to be someone else, or when you feel the pull to conform, remember, you are your own constant, the one who will carry all the versions of yourself through time. Treat yourself with kindness. Speak to yourself with respect. Show up for yourself with love. Because no matter what anyone else thinks or says, you are the one who matters most in your life. And living intentionally with that truth is a radical act of self-love. There's a subtle trap many of us fall into, often without even realizing it: the endless cycle of people-pleasing. It starts innocently enough, doing small favors, saying yes to invitations, smoothing over conflicts. But before long, it can become a pattern where our sense of self-worth is tied to how much we can please others. Here's the thing: people-pleasing feels like freedom at first. We think, if I just make everyone happy, I won't have to deal with rejection or loneliness. So we tuck away our own needs, desires, and opinions, trading our authenticity for acceptance. But the truth is the exact opposite. People-pleasing is a prison, a cage built from fear of judgment, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. When you live to please others, you give away your power. You lose touch with who you really are because you're constantly bending to fit into their expectations. And the harder you try, the more exhausted and empty you feel. The real freedom, it begins the moment you stop living for the applause and start living for you. When you stop shrinking to make others comfortable. When you start saying no to things that don't serve your well-being. When you start speaking your truth, even if it ruffles feathers. That kind of freedom feels raw and vulnerable at first. It feels uncertain because it asks you to stand alone sometimes. But it's also the kind of freedom that brings deep peace, because you're no longer trapped by the need to perform or to earn approval. You're finally free to be whole. When you break free from people-pleasing, you give yourself permission to live in alignment with your values. You create boundaries that protect your energy and your heart. You cultivate relationships where you are loved, not for what you do, but for who you are. And here's the most beautiful part: the more you practice this freedom, the easier it becomes. You build courage muscle by muscle, and over time you become unstoppable, not because you have no fears, but because you refuse to let fear dictate your life. So if you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or drained, ask yourself, where in my life am I people-pleasing instead of living authentically? And then take one brave step toward freedom, because your truest self is waiting on the other side of those walls. And that's where real power and real joy begin. At the end of the day, the truth is simple but profound. Nobody else is going to care about your life the way you do. Nobody else is responsible for your happiness, your growth, your dreams. And that can feel heavy, or it can feel incredibly freeing. Because when you stop waiting for others to notice you, to approve you, to save you, you reclaim your power. You step into your own story as the author, the hero, the champion of your life. It won't always be easy. You will face moments of doubt, fear, and loneliness. But in those moments, remember, you don't have to perform for anyone else. You only need to be brave enough to show up for yourself. So do it for you. Choose yourself. Honor your worth. Live your truth. Because the only life you get is the one you build for yourself, and that is more than enough. There comes a moment often after we've exhausted ourselves chasing applause, approval, and acceptance. When we look around and ask, why am I doing all of this? And the truth can hit hard. If you're doing it for them, it will never be enough. If you're hustling for worthiness, your tank will always be running on fumes. Because when your motivation comes from pleasing, proving, or performing for others, you're essentially building your life on shifting sand. People's opinions change, tastes change, praise is inconsistent, validation runs out. And when it does, you're left depleted, questioning your value, wondering why the burnout feels so personal. That's because it is personal. But here's the pivot, the sacred liberating shift. Do it for you, not for their claps, not for their envy, not even for their understanding. Do it because your soul feels alive when you do. And do it because it aligns with your truth. Do it because it brings you peace, pride, joy, or growth. When you pursue goals, dreams, or healing from a place of deep personal purpose, something changes. You stop chasing and start becoming. You find energy and integrity. You find motivation and meaning. You find endurance and self-respect. Doing it for you isn't selfish, it's sustainable. Because you know what happens when you build your life around your own values instead of others' expectations? You stop breaking yourself into pieces to be digestible. You stop apologizing for your ambition, your boundaries, your voice. You stop waiting for permission to be who you already are. And that kind of motivation, that kind of self-honoring, it doesn't evaporate when people stop clapping. It doesn't collapse when you're misunderstood. It doesn't disappear when the spotlight dims. It stays because it's yours